Kelsey. This is my channel, The Fancy Hat Lady Reads. I'm wearing one of my fancy BookTube hats, and today I'm bringing you a Top 5 Wednesday video. Now, Top 5 Wednesday is a Goodreads group originally created by Lainey from Ginger Reads Lainey and currently moderated by Sam from Thoughts on Tomes. I'll leave the information down below in case you want to check it out. Every week there's a topic for which you can choose your top 5 books. I try to do one of these every month. This week's topic is books from before you started fill in the blank, whatever your book recommending platform is. So in this case for me, it's books from before I started BookTube. Now a little bit of the history here. I started reading again en masse for fun when I graduated college in 2014. When I was in college, I really didn't have the time. And also, I didn't have a good source of recommendations. And I feel like becoming a massive big-time reader had everything for me to do with finding a solid source of recommendations I like. And that's actually the thing that I like the most about BookTube, is being able to subscribe to certain people who you know you can get kind of personalized recommendations from. So back to that timeline, it was the summer of 2014 when I really started reading again. About the middle of 2015 is when I joined Goodreads, and that helped me start to find a whole ton more recommendations. And then not long after that I discovered BookTube, and then I joined BookTube at the very beginning of 2016. So what I'm looking at for books from before I started BookTube is that sort of year and a half, the second half of 2014 and then through 2015. Now, my first BookTube video ever that I did was the BookTube newbie tag, but I added on to the end of that a favorites of 2015. So those are things that I sort of did wrap up on my channel in that very first BookTube video of mine. I listed and talked a bit about all of my 5-star books of the year. And most of those are books that I've had occasion to talk about many times on this channel since, or reference them in relation to other books that I've liked. So I've only chosen one representative from that list of 5-star books of 2015 that I think I've talked about the least. The other set of books that I really love that timeline encompasses for me is basically all of the McKinley books. So I've also chosen just one of those that I don't think I hype up quite enough on this channel. And then the other 3 books are going to be solid 4-star ratings that I think just haven't gotten enough of a spotlight in any of my videos up until this point. I will say that as I was compiling my list of books for this video earlier this month, and my list for monthly recommendations, which was the last video that I posted that was books published before 2010, I was noticing a huge amount of overlap in terms of some of my actual favorites that fit both of those categories. I wanted to talk about totally different books in these 2 videos. So my last video, the oldies video, I actually went with, in publication date, the oldest books that I have read that I loved. And so for this, if you want to think of this as like a continuation of that oldies video, these are some more of the mid-range books. None of these are books that have been published since 2010. So my one book from that list of 5-star reads from 2015 that I don't talk about how much I liked it quite enough on this channel is The Princess Bride by William Goldman. This is comedic. It's a hoot, but it also gets quite serious sometimes, which is the best type of comedy. But what I actually loved most about this book, reading it, was the narrative framing device. It's presented as this sort of stuffy old text that it seemed to me, as I was reading it, like William Goldman's fictionalized narrator version of himself was willfully misinterpreting this fusty old text in order to abridge it and turn it into what he thinks it should be. And that sort of commentary on the text type narration in a book is something I just absolutely adore, especially in fantasy, especially in zany fantasy. I love it. And the McKinley book that I want to talk about for this topic today is Chalice. Now this is, let me make sure I don't have any glare here. This is one of her fairy tale-esque books, although this one is not actually a retelling, so it didn't make it into my retellings monthly recommendations video from last month, which I will link for you if you want to hear me talk about all of her actual retellings, which I do in that video. But it absolutely baffles me that this book is as obscure as it is and not as well known as some of her more famous books, because I actually think that people who love her fairy tale retellings, for which she's most famous, would really love this too. This is a gentle and meandering fantasy story about community leadership and local magic and beekeeping. It focuses on the protagonist Marisol, who has unexpectedly become the Chalice of her local community, which is the second highest role in local government, and it's all related to the magic of the land itself. And I find it very hard to imagine disliking this book. I think you would have to be sort of cold and dead inside to dislike this book. I think the one possibly really off-putting thing here is that it does meander a lot. The narrative is not linear, so if you don't like major side tangents, you might be frustrated. I'll mention that this book is actually the reason I started reading Patricia A. McKillip's books, because I saw in reviews for this people saying that it was McKinley's most McKillip-esque book, so I was like, ooh, who's this McKillip person, and I should read her books. And when I rated this 5 stars on Goodreads, Goodreads started recommending me some of McKillip's books. And I would say that this is very comparable in style to something like The Bell at Sealy Head. So that's a nice bridge into The Forgotten Beasts of Eld, which was the first book by McKillip that I read. This is sort of classic, one of her best known books. This is also one of her older books. It's from 1974, so it's got a more old-fashioned fantasy style to the writing. This is one I feel like I desperately need to reread at some point, because it's very easy to race through pretty quickly, but it's also got a lot of depth and a lot of complexity in the storytelling and in the themes, and I feel like the first time through I didn't spend enough time with it to really give it all of the attention that it deserved. But oh my gosh, the writing in this is just beautiful. Next, I'd like to talk about the Westmark trilogy by Lloyd Alexander. The first book is Westmark, so that's the one that I'm recommending here, but just to let you know, the second book is this one here, The Kestrel, and the third book is The Beggar Queen. Now, these are some of Lloyd Alexander's more adult-ish books. He's known for his kids or middle grade books. I would say by modern standards I would categorize these as young adult in terms of the content and the style. They're very whimsical and kind of quirky in terms of the writing style and the characterizations of the characters, but especially books 2 and 3 do get quite dark and quite heavy on the political themes. The first book is incredibly formulaic. We follow a boy named Theo who's an apprentice to a printer at a printing press. The printing press gets destroyed, and so he ends up on the run with a motley crew, and stuff ensues. I will say, in the jump between this book and the second book, there's like this really unconvincing romance that kind of felt really poorly written, like Lloyd Alexander just didn't know how to write romance. But other than that, I really enjoyed this series, and I did actually really appreciate the sort of juxtaposition of serious political themes with this kind of wacky, whimsical writing style. This is a non-magical fantasy world, but it definitely feels like fantasy writing because it's got this stylized approach to it. And then the last book that I have here is Tea with the Black Dragon by R.A. MacAvoy. This is a mystery novel. It is mostly a mystery novel that was contemporary when it was written. This was published in 1983, and it has to do a lot with the tech and computer industry at the time, which is interesting for me to read as a millennial. But it also does have a fantasy element winding through it, and that has to do with the Black Dragon. I would also recommend this to readers looking for fantasy books with older protagonists. The protagonist of this book, Martha, is a middle-aged woman with an adult daughter. Now, there is a sequel to this called Twisting the Rope that I have but haven't yet read, and I haven't decided yet if I'm going to need to reread this one before reading Twisting the Rope. I may do that, or I might just dive into the second one and see if I sink or swim. Anyhow, those are my top 5 books from before I joined BookTube for me today. I hope you're having a nice day. Let me know if you've read any of these, if you want to read any of these, what you think. Anyhow, that is all. Bye for now.